Good day, fish tankers. Every year the same topic pops up on YouTube and it does the rounds and it inspires a lot of debate, and that's the topic of no water changes. You can do no water changes on your aquarium, or some would recommend doing no water changes, and there will be this big debate kicking off about it. So I thought I would weigh in and also get your opinion in the comments below on the topic. So if you're interested, then stick around. The topic of no water changes is controversial, therefore it's sort of clickbaity. Just check what I'm doing, and it inspires a lot of debate. Now, when I started keeping aquariums back in the 80s, then the advice that you got from the better pet shops that actually gave you some advice at all was usually change about 25% of the water every month. Now these days, the sort of general advice that they'll send a beginner going out of a door, change about 25% every week maybe. Now what is the reasoning behind it? Why do we do water changes? It's because of a nitrogen cycle. That's the cycle in your aquarium where beneficial, mostly aerobic bacteria converts toxic waste into less toxic waste. Ammonia gets converted into nitrite, NO2, both are toxic, and then it goes to NO3, which is only toxic in higher concentrations. And you do partial water changes to dilute the nitrate, the NO3, to keep it at acceptable levels, and also other things, to replenish elements in your water that maybe be getting depleted, to maybe if you're having a high-tech tank and you're constantly adding fertilizer to the water, that's not an exact science. You may have a bit too much of one thing, a bit too little of another thing. To sort of safeguard against that, that's also a reason for doing partial water changes. And another thing that people don't think about, if you have small juvenile fish growing up, in some species, not all, the bigger fish secrete pheromones, which inhibits the growth of the smaller fish. So that's another reason why one sometimes does water changes. Now, the debate about water changes, no water changes, I think we can just make it clear. It doesn't apply to growing out fry or to breeding fish. It's not breeding fish maybe, but not growing out fry. If you're going to grow fish quickly, you're going to need to do a lot of water changes. I think that's well established. They grow quicker that way. And then also for high-tech tanks, as I've mentioned, where the crop plants growth is boosted by the addition of CO2 and fancy lights, and you put in a lot of fertilizer, you're going to have to do some partial water changes, or you're going to end up with too much of some kind of nutrient and possibly an algae bloom. But now that no water changes things is usually propagated by people like Father Fish and a couple of others. There's a very popular video of an aquarium store, I think it's in San Francisco, owned by, I think he's Indonesian, the owner that owns it, but seems like a really cool dude. And it's a very popular video, and a video has been made about that fish store across YouTube channels. I'll leave a link in the description. But that store, what you notice there immediately are a couple of things. There's a store that says they don't do any water changes because of certain things in the municipal water. That store has got a lot of plants. They even have a bit of low-tech CO2 with, so in a DIY way, to make the plants go faster. So the tanks are all overgrown. And number two, it's got a deep substrate of at least 3 inches, like most of my aquariums has. Now, a deep substrate will, over time, cause an anaerobic layer, and it will, together with plants, but the substrate plays a big part, reduce nitrate buildup. I found it personally in my tanks, and I do far less water changes. But is no water changes a good idea? Let's look at nature first. People might tell me there's no water changes in nature, but let's look at it. A stream, a river, is flowing and it's constantly changing water, like you see at this little fountain there at the farm where I grew up, where I got some of my old aquarium stuff out of. But a river is running, and as long as it's running, it's constantly changing water. Now, a big lake, like the one you see here in the estate where I stay, that doesn't change water at the same pace, but the walls of a dam, it's soil, it's clay. It also, water permeates through that wall of a dam very slowly. So some of the water, not just by evaporation, goes away into the soil surrounding that lake. And when there's rainfall, you get a water change. Not constantly like a river, yet it is there. Same with little ponds and puddles. They dry up, some of the water seeps away, and then rainwater comes in. So I would argue in various frequencies in nature, they're changing water constantly or at least frequently. Now, we all have to do top-ups. That's when evaporation makes the water level drop and you add more water. It's not the same as a water change because pure water evaporates and you put more water in with its own minerals or lack of minerals or whatever is in there that you add. Now, I test my nitrate, so I like to keep it under 25 ppm, no more than 40 or 50. And when it reaches that level, that's when I do a water change. Now with a tank behind me, all my aquariums, when I was ill once, I took 8 weeks before I did a water change. I tested the water, all the fish, everything was fine. It didn't need it if I went on nitrate levels alone. Now the one behind me, some of the fish here that you don't see, that's always in the plants. You see in my feeding time is some big clown loaches and some very big Siamese algae eaters, a big angel, 2 fair-sized porgeramis in among all the other small fish. So this tank is actually overstocked. There's no ammonia or nitrite, so the filters and the substrate together with the plants are coping. So that doesn't build up, but there is a nitrate build up in this tank now. So I do a 50% water change every 3 weeks now, not every 6 weeks. While the rest of my tanks still remain on about every 6 weeks. And the other tanks, it's not because there's nitrate build up, it's just for me, and you guys got to weigh in on the comments below. Do you agree or do you disagree with me? It's just that there are things that build up in the water and get depleted that I might not know of. You know, that's beyond the scope of a pH, a GH, a KH, a nitrate, ammonia and nitrite test kit. You know, there's only so many test kits that you can afford to have. So I do it as a safeguard to make sure that there's not unseen stuff that builds up, you know, that I don't know about. And I do find when I change some of the water, the fish seem to enjoy it. You know, if fish are sort of glass surfing, that means they're a bit stressed because of abrupt change. But if you look at the next day, you'll see, you know, the males are displaying more and it seems to perk them up a little bit. And also, you know, I have very soft water. When I do a water change, I can add some alkaline buffer just to put in a little bit of minerals, because otherwise I find that the snails developed white patches, or God forbid holes, it never went that far on their shells. So I do that to replenish stuff and to just as an insurance policy. Because also where our aquariums differ from nature, look at our stocking. Even if your aquarium has very low stocking levels, try and take a chunk. Imagine taking a chunk out of a river, out of a lake, out of a sea, the size of our aquariums, like maybe a chunk size out of a 4-foot high aquarium, you know, put it in a natural ecosystem, pull it up. If you could theoretically just do that without fish swimming away, you're not going to have nearly the amount of fish or bioload or whatever that you see in our aquariums. It will probably be more like this entire room filled up with water with one small guppy in it. So that's another thing. Our stocking levels are never, it's always more than it would be in a natural system, almost always. Maybe small little pools of killifish that's drying on the savanna, okay. But we always have much higher stocking levels. So that's another thing why I think it's good to do a water change. I've made a video about how to do less water changes. I'll link it here in the end of the video. There are ways, a lot of plants help. A deep substrate, that also helps to do less water changes. If you have smaller fish and if you have less fish, you're going to have to do less water changes either. Doing no water changes, can it work? Who has got an aquarium that's been standing for a year with no water changes that just worked like a house on fire? Many of the old-timer, older than me fish keepers, you know, in my dad's time, when was that? I don't even remember. The kids had to fight dinosaurs going to school. But you know, many of them I had an aquarium and it stood there for a year. I just did top ups and it went on for a couple of years like that. And they'll tell you that it worked. You know, I wasn't alive to see it. That's what other people claim. I think it can work if you have a proper substrate. If you have many plants and you're lightly stocked. Let's say you've got a 40-gallon breeder, a 3-foot tank, let's say, a little bit more than that in our terms here in South Africa, and it's got a lot of plants in it, and it's got like 10 neons and 6 corridoras in it. Maybe it's gonna be fine without water changes. You just keep topping up. It might well be fine because those are soft water species. pH will start dropping, although I have stuff in the sand that buffers it. You know, that might work fine, and it works for some people. To me, my logic just tells me it's a closed system. Nature tends to be a more open system. The scale of nature is much bigger, and that's why I don't feel comfortable with no water changes. I think often we do way too many water changes, maybe too big water changes. Water changes can be harmful if you don't know what's coming out of your tap. If your water in your aquarium, let's say I've got soft water and my aquarium water is buffered because I'm keeping Malawians, African cichlids, then I don't want to do too much of too bigger water change because my water out of a tap is soft and I'm going to give a pH shock, and I won't maybe do more than a third at most at one time, because then it will have to get buffered up in the aquarium unless I do it outside of a tank. But here I've got soft water. I buffer it a little bit as I pour it in. I can do big water changes because I'm very, very lucky. I'm one of a few places in South Africa where the water quality is more or less reliable, here in the Helderberg, Stellenbosch, Cape Town area. So I can do that. But that's my opinion. I think to know how much water, how often you should change, you got to test your aquarium for nitrates. There are those that say that nitrates don't do any harm. I've heard that on one of the YouTubers' video, but it's just nitrates doesn't do any harm. I would challenge that, and I would say go to a natural ecosystem that is unpolluted, not one that's got effluent from farming pouring into it with fertilizers and whatever. It'll be high in phosphates and you'll have an algae boom. But an unpolluted natural source, go take your nitrate test kit and go and test for nitrate. I can guarantee you if it's an unpolluted source in a natural system, there'll be no detectable nitrate. So my experience over the long-term exposure to nitrates will harm fish. You'll start seeing they'll get a bit of fin rot. You'll get funny diseases popping up for no reason that I suspect is part of that. You'll see breeding activity stopping. You'll just see the fish look a bit haggard. So high exposure to nitrate above, let's say, 40 or 50 ppm over the long term, it definitely will have an effect on your fish's health. That's my opinion. If you differ, tell me in the comments. Well, that's it from me, guys. That's my opinion on the whole no water change thing. I would treat it with caution, but yes, you don't have to do that many water changes if you just have a low-tech planted tank with a solid substrate like I've got and proper filtration. You can do a lot less than people will tell you. But always err on the side of caution. And until we see each other again, keep taking good care of those domestic denizens of the deep.